Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Shouting into the Void. This is the regular video series we put on this channel. It's still Doctor Who because everything on here is pretty much Doctor Who, which is fine. But this is the weekly series where myself and Liam we talk about New Who, specifically in order, and specifically today, the End of Time Part One. This is the beginning of the end, I guess, or the beginning of the end of the end, if that makes sense. It's the beginning of the end of the beginning of the end.
Sure.
And this sees David Tennant by himself, obviously, as the 10th Doctor, faced with, I guess, just his death, or at least the premise of his death.
hmm
He's alerted that something is coming back. Who could it be? What could it be? It's the Master. They tell him straight away it's the Master.
He is returning and they are returning and everyone's returning and
No. What is
Okay,
this?
you
The
calm down.
centenary special? Yes. So David Tennant's been wandering around by himself for obviously the whole of the specials, doing Time Lord stuff, saving people, probably saving people he shouldn't have saved. Obviously, when we last saw him, he saved people he shouldn't save, and he'd gone too far. Although he then went off and stopped death. If you read the Time Lord Victorious books, so there's a little bit of depth there.
Mm.
But now he's back on Earth. He has to stop the Master. But something larger is afoot. And yeah, he runs into Wilf. Yay, Wilf.
This boy.
Donna is there somewhere in the background. Sylvia is also there. Yeah, I think that's roughly about it, really. The Master obviously is there. What did you think of this Christmassy episode?
Christmassy. Um, it was fine.
Ooh.
It's
Ooh.
it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of how I expected to feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there are undeniably some very good things in there, which I very much enjoyed. Um, but yeah, for me personally, I think it suffered for being an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I think I found myself either not caring or disliking all the new kind of characters in there, um, which kind of just made it drag a bit for me. But the core elements, I think they obviously get right with like the Doctor and Wilf and everything like that. So it's a solid start. I think they build up to something that could be interesting for part two. But yeah, as far as like part ones go, I don't think it's my favorite of all time or any means. But yeah, it's a solid outing, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. That's your opinion. I quite liked it.
Oh, really?
A fair bit. Who would have guessed?
Who would have guessed?
Although I do agree. My when we go on to my negatives, they do, as you mentioned, sort of relate around the newer characters that are introduced. I have some issues with it. Obviously, it's nowhere. It's not a perfect episode. And it obviously also suffers from the whole being a part one where there's a lot of setup, there's a lot of introducing of things and that. Especially when I think a lot of the stuff that happens in this one doesn't necessarily continue into part two because it's effectively its own episode,
Yeah.
part two.
And part one being an hour long as well is also not going to help
Yes.
it really.
No. And I get this was a Christmas special and they're always normally, an hour long. But there are times in this where I'm like, okay, you could end the episode here. Like, there is a big moment where you could just end the episode there and you don't necessarily need the rest of it. But it is what it is. I still had a lot of fun with it. I think the positives for me definitely outweigh the things I didn't like. And there's more positives than there are negatives for me. But as always, we do have 3 positives and 3 negatives. So what is your first positive of the episode?
My first positive is far and away the best bit, the Doctor and Wilf's relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I love them together. I think they're very, very wholesome. I think the big standout is the scene when they're having a little chat in the cafe about impending doom and stuff. For the most part, I don't like the Doctor's thought on regeneration being death, but that's just me. But I think that whole scene is incredibly well acted. David Tennant's fantastic in that scene. And yeah, just kind of seeing them reunite again is just a joy because I really like their dynamic. just from like the more subtle moments when Will's like, "Oh, it's an honor to see you again." And the Doctor's like very, very pleased and actually salutes him back and everything. It's very wholesome. And they just
he
have
gets sexually harassed, but okay.
He gets sexually harassed and the scene's ruined. But for a brief period, things are good. But yeah, I do really enjoy their dynamic, and Wilf, relentlessly trying to find the Doctor again, and then when he does find him, he just wants him to be happy and tries to make him happy. And look, Donna's over there and risks his granddaughter's life, but that's fine. Yes, I just really enjoy their bond, and even like the funnier moments as well. I love when they just abandon Sylvia. He's like, "You're not leaving me with her." Fair enough. I'll endanger you. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Oh man, get in the TARDIS. And like Will's reaction to the TARDIS and everything is all really cool. And yeah, it's a very unique Doctor companion dynamic for what is going to be Ten's last story. So I like that they've lent in on that, and Wilf was clearly a fan favorite in series 4, so I like the choice to bring him back for this one and have him play like the main companion role in things. They just have, I think, one of the best relationships we've seen in New Who. There's just something about it that I think hits all the right notes emotionally, but also comedically and stuff. But yeah, I really enjoyed that as like the core focus of the episode, and them kind of finding their way back to each other. There's some great emotional moments with them. There's some funny moments with them. And yeah, I think they did a great job of setting up what's going to be obviously a very emotional kind of climax to their relationship in part 2. Not that we would have known it at the time, where they were going with it, watching part 1 for the first time. But I think they do a great job of kind of setting that up and reminding us that these two didn't actually spend that much time together in series 4, yet they still kind of built up a really strong rapport. And I think it's a very smart choice to kind of lean into that for this episode.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And sort of my third positive is sort of on those same lines. There's specific Wilf and Dr. Scene in the cafe. I think is very good and excellent acting from both Bernard and David. I think it really adds to the scale, I think, of these episodes with sort of these two powerhouse performances in this first episode. I think it sort of really marks the tone, I think, and sort of shows that this is an event, and it's a big thing that's happening at the minute, which is good. And obviously you get different aspects of Wilf in this, with his past, especially in the war, I think is quite a nice hint towards. And obviously their relationship is excellent throughout, from taking him in the TARDIS for the first time and Wilf being like, "Yep, all right, I don't know what you're saying, but I'm going to go for it." To sort of Wilf asking the right questions and being that sort of audience surrogate that Doctor Who obviously needs sometimes. And I think that the cafe scene just sort of epitomises everything about that. And even in my notes, I do like the explanation of how regeneration feels. So that's completely opposite to how you feel, which is, I think, going to be a theme, perhaps, of these two episodes.
Quite possibly, yes.
But I do enjoy how he sort of says it, and it's something that's, I think, kept up with the Doctors moving forward as well. With Matt Smith and Pete Capaldi, they've all sort of had similar feelings of, I'm the same person, but I'm not the same person. And it's very strange to explain and to get across that feeling without sort of explaining it as somebody's dying. So I get you sort of either explain it like that or you don't explain it. And for this story to work, it kind of needs to have that weight behind it. And not every Doctor needs to feel that way. Obviously, Eccleston hasn't felt that in New Who. I don't know. We don't know where Jodie's going to go with that. But obviously, a big bit of Capaldi's leaving was that he didn't want to die and regenerate. It's just how writers want to tackle it, so we'll see if that remains moving forward. But I don't mind it. I don't have too much of a bug to bear with it. But that's nice. Me. I know, right? How dare I?
How dare you enjoy Doctor Who? Who are you? What are you, a Doctor Who fan?
This is the only one I'll enjoy. All the rest of this from now on, no! Hating!
Oh yeah, well, it's still my favourite. You're not going to like anything going forward,
That's
are you?
That's true. I'll hate every single episode. So what is your second positive?
What is my second positive?
None. I have none.
Yeah, I did struggle to find things I was like super passionate about, but I think that's harsh on the episode. But the Ood Exposition Scene is my next one.
Interesting.
Because actually, I wanted to celebrate flashbacks being good in this era. I'm like, yay!
That's fair.
Because
it makes
I
sense
think
now.
Yeah, bringing the Ood into it, and that different kind of Ood voiced by Brian Cox and everything. It's just because they've pre-established like the Ood as a species and like what they're capable of with all their psychic nonsense and stuff. It's not just out of the blue like I'm psychic for plot reasons. This has been well established multiple times with the Ood, so it makes sense to bring them back into it and use them as kind of like setting the stage for like this is the scale of this. It's all about the end of time, and we've advanced our species because we have, and things are collapsing. He is returning, and they are returning, and everything's returning. I really liked the fact that they became all seeing in this way across 100 years, and therefore they can show the Doctor the bit that we as an audience saw last of the time, also with the ring and everything, and then we actually see who picked up the ring, random woman number 2. I think it's a clever way of the Doctor finding that out without it particularly feeling forced and stuff. And because the Ood is a very popular race of creatures, and one I think lots of the audience have an affinity for, you're just going to buy into what they say and what they're telling the Doctor. So I thought that really set the stage well for an epic confrontation. So I really do think that the first 15 minutes of this episode, I think, are incredibly strong. So I think culminating in that scene.
No. I just. What, are you including the Master's revival in that? Or
no.
Is it just no? Okay. I didn't know whether 15 minutes.
It ends with the Ood scene when he leaves.
Okay.
I mean, I think the Master's revival is the best Master scene in the episode, but we will get there.
Interesting.
And even then, I don't really like it. But anyway, I think it's again a very clever choice to have the Ood be the ones to kind of reveal the stakes of what's going on here and reveal that the Master's back and kind of put those pieces in motion. And just kind of really sets an epic scale to come. I think it was done really, really effectively. So in terms of like building up the tension and building up the stakes and the scale that they're aiming for, I think they did a fantastic job with that scene. So it was a very great way of using the pre-established lore of the show in the past couple of years with the Ood to be like, this is serious now.
Yeah. I think it also helps because, this was on Christmas Day, so there might be a few people tuning in that haven't watched for however long, so it's a good way of catching the audience up with where everything is.
It's not like, here's a flashback to 2 episodes ago,
yes,
as we have seen before and stuff. This feels justified in like, remember this, especially because it's a Christmas Day episode as well.
It's not a flashback to 2 minutes ago when the Doctor walked through the door, which we've had before. It's fine. Well, based on what you just said, you're not going to like my first positive because it's John Sim.
I like John Sim. I just don't like the Master.
I think John Sim's role in this is excellent. I think he does a very good job of just playing an absolutely unhinged Master.
He does.
In this.
That person's not the Master, but yeah.
No, I disagree. I would say there's still the masteriness about him of the charm and the sort of cunning way that he sort of manages to get himself into the situation.
I'm glad you think that.
I do. There are, I have some issues with it, which is fine. But I think overall, I do really enjoy his performance in this and how crazed he is and sort of, he's uncontrollable. I think in this, and I know that from reading the writer's tale that I think John Sim wanted to emulate Heath Ledger's Joker in this.
He did.
And I think you can see aspects of that in there, especially during sort of the first scene with the homeless people. And I really enjoyed that scene as well because I think once again it's a great performance from him. It's just the line delivery alone is excellent and memorable. I think it's creepy as well, quite creepy. How it does it might be slightly undone by the end of the scene, but I think it's still a very good entrance to the character, entrance to where he is. I like his whole revival scene. I think I wrote it down as like the stupid stinking human disgrace. I was like, that's an excellent line, and that's
my Twitter bio.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think he's great in this. Obviously, towards the end of the episode as well. I think the range he has to show with all the different little masters he's playing, from the president of the United States to a cheering lady in a dress and high heels. Yeah. I think it's great. I just think it's he's great in this. I do enjoy the Master in this. And it might be because I had no preconceptions of what the Master was before seeing John Sims' version. So therefore,
I think that's probably
I think that plays in the thing, and I think that's with a lot of people. But it's a similar thing with the Doctors. They can be completely different when they come out. Whatever. I think he's just great in this. I think he gives a great performance, and I'm glad that he was back for David's sort of final two-parter.
It feels fitting. I think it's a good choice.
Yeah, definitely. What's your third positive?
My third positive, the Time Lord reveal at the end.
Nice, that's one of mine.
I get chills every time they cut to that. I'm like, yes, that man can spit.
Yeah, Bond, go, Bond, go.
I was always taught at school and at uni, the sign of a very good actor is someone who spits a lot when they speak. I'm like, yes, go for it. And I love how obvious it is because of the completely black background. I'm like, yeah, you spit all over them. The poor cameraman, like, you couldn't cast Timothy Dalton in things nowadays.
No,
you'd have to like really go away from him. That's why he wasn't in Doom Patrol in the latest season of that, because he was too
big zoom lens on him. So
he's quite vulnerable now. But yeah, it's just great. The little teases of him throughout the episode, and we hear his voice for a bit, and then it's like the final day, and I'm like, oh, it's Timothy Dalton. That's cool.
Yeah.
You're like, well, who are you though? And then you think, okay, so that's where the story's going. Everyone's the Master now. Okay, whatever. And then it's like, but that's don't care about that. It's absolutely unimportant, and it's nothing because the Time Lords are here. I was like, oh shit! I remember first watching that. I'm like, oh damn, oh damn, he did it.
Yeah.
Oh Lord, he coming. So yeah, I think it's such a cool kind of shot, just panning out to reveal him in the robes and everyone behind him and stuff. And then when you see like the big crowd of Time Lords that he's talking to and raising his staff thing at the end, it's a great kind of final shot for the episode. And you think the stakes going up to this point, and then you're like, oh wow, okay, this is something altogether different. So I just enjoy the idea of Timothy Dalton just reading a story to the Time Lords for the whole episode. I think it's very funny, and it builds up to an awesome reveal at the end. It really is like a game-changing kind of thing. It really does throw the story in a completely new direction, but I don't think it necessarily feels like, oh, well, I want to stick to where this is going. It doesn't feel like a plot twist for the sake of a plot twist. I feel like it expands and it will improve the story in the long run. And again, it's something that feels all the more kind of massive because we've had 4 years of the Time Lords all being dead, apart from the Master. So yeah, I think that was a really cool reveal.
Yeah, I think what really makes it stand out is the fact that this is the first time they've appeared sort of in the show since it came back. Obviously, the Time Lords. Even I knew of, about the history and everything. Just not necessarily just from watching New Who, but from sort of other things as well. So they've been built up, and they've been built up in the way, especially that they weren't good. Although the Doctor will talk about that, he'll also acknowledge, the Time War was pretty bad, guys. And so what should be like, oh my god, that's great for the Doctor. You have that sense of dread of, shit, this can't be good. And it's not. But I think
spoiler alert, it's not.
It's a great bit of casting to get Timothy Dalton in, I think. Obviously, fresh off the back of Hot Fuzz. I think, he's a great choice. It's really menacing. The sort of narration as well throughout it provides a nice bit of context to what's going on. And, I'm not saying that the whole Master plotline couldn't have held up by itself, but for the end of David Tennant's run, it kind of needed that more sort of scale to it. And I think the Time Lords coming back and it all being rooted in the Time War and all that kind of stuff really sort of brings everything full circle for Russell as well as David, to be fair. And I'm looking forward to how well it works next week. and what impact it has on the story overall. Because I think, you know, we might have to believe some techno babble for a little bit, but you know, it's fine, I guess. Did you have any other sort of additional positives you wanted to touch on?
I liked the cast.
Nice. All of the
David
cast.
Tennant was really good. Bernard Cribbins, not all of the cast. Bernard Cribbins was really good.
Yeah.
John Sim was really good. Timothy Dalton was great. Yeah, I think the characters that mattered in this story, I think, were very well performed, and you know they get everything across, and they delivered as they always do.
Yes, fair enough. I don't want to give a shout out to David Tennant. I think again, you know, he does a very good performance in this. The cafe scene, obviously, the talk between him and the master as well in the sort of industrial wasteland, I think, is very well done. And yeah, I think he does. You know, he has to do a great job because it's his last 2 episodes. You know, he can't really phone it in at this point. And I think he does great. It probably helps that you're opposite, you know, John Sim and Bernard Cribbins. It does make you raise your game slightly.
Yeah. And he knows it's his last one. He's going to give it his all, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. My other sort of positive is just called the audacity. The audacity to turn everyone into the master. I was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I appreciate you've done this, but what? I can't believe you've done this. Basically, it's ridiculous. I think it provides a very surreal cliffhanger on itself. Sort of like what the heck is going on? Look at John Sim in all of these different clothes. It's so funny. And yeah, I think it's great, and I don't think they could do it again because it would just be ridiculous. But I think it works. I think for me, you know, the science kind of works. It's fine. I believe it. So I have no complaints there. I just think it's an absolutely bonkers thing to do, especially for a finale, and you know, the end. Your last thing as a showrunner and as a doctor to have the master make himself everyone, I think, is very good. And like replace real world people. You know, Obama was in this, not the real Obama, but Obama was in the character of Obama was in this, and they just turned him into a white man. That's big. That's big, Russell. I can't believe you did that.
This is whitewashing on a global scale.
Literally. And then to call yourself the master race as well, like, all right, okay, pushing the barriers here.
Yeah.
But I did appreciate it, and I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. And I can imagine just people on Christmas Day being like, "What the heck?" And then the Time Lords being like, "What?" And just sort of that gif of that WWE presenter just being like, just falling back on his chair is what I imagine the situation was. But yes, that's it for the positives. We'll now get into the negatives, where I feel, to be fair, I think we might have some. So, based on me inferring what you've said so far, I reckon we'll have some crossover here.
We might have one in common.
maybe a couple. What's your first negative?
The master.
Okay.
And
well, this isn't on my list.
Everything to do with him. No, I didn't think it would be somehow. Yeah, everything about it I hate. John Sim is fantastic with what he gets given, but I don't enjoy where they took his version of the master in this particular story. You know, I liked him very much so in the previous 3 part that he was in. I like him very much so in series 10, but for me this is an absolute flop. I was trying to like, how do I word this and not be like it's and you know. So I found the Den of Geeks review he posted on December 24th. I'm like, there's lots of spoilers in here considering you published it the day before this aired.
Maybe they updated it after.
Maybe they did, yeah. Hopefully, but we'll see. But there's just a paragraph here that I was like, yes, that sounds about right. And they've said, I've always loved the Master as an enemy, as he's the one foe the Doctor faces who's the most obvious foil for him. It's 2 equals going head to head. When you give the Master superpowers, where he can leap over high buildings and fire bolts from his hands, you disturb the balance and make the fight a little less interesting as a consequence. That may just be me, granted, but I thought about the elements surrounding the Master were the weakest part of the End of Time Part 1. So, you know, I was like, yeah, that's kind of where I stand on it. So, yeah, I think it's just... They've made him so insane and so mad it's a different character. I think. You know, I can see the Dark Knight Joker vibe and stuff, but he's not the Dark Knight Joker. He's the Master, and you know, I think there's some similarities, of course, but I think there should be more intelligence to there. And yes, he had this like plot to turn everyone into himself and stuff, but even that plot I think is quite dumb and silly. And he came up with that at the last minute anyway once he got kidnapped, so he was just mad and everything before that. Yeah, I just think that takes away from him a bit, and it takes what's interesting about the Master away from him. The whole thing with like the cult, I think, is again weird and kind of contradicted in other parts of the script and kind of silly. And I don't know, the fact that he like made plans like, oh, he knew he might die, so we have the books of Saxon, which are what? Okay. And we have these potions of life, which are what? Okay. Potions. Lucy makes the anti-version of it. Okay, cool. It just seems a bit too both high concept and too vague at the same time. And the fact that he made preparations in case he dies, I think massively takes away from his victory over the Doctor to choose to die. Because I'm like, well, you've just planned to come back anyway, so you're undoing this victory for yourself. So why are you so smug? And yeah, I think the Master Race thing, I wish they hadn't just called it the Master Race. I think that was tone deaf, personally. You know, especially making him blonde in the story. It was a choice. You know, I remember watching this when it aired thinking, it's a bit weird. So, you know, the Time Lords coming on at the end did save that for me. It's like, okay, there's something else to it. This is not just the Master, it's everyone. You know, it's just so far removed from, I think, they took away the most interesting part of the Master to me, which was like his intelligence to rival the Doctor and that kind of cunning side to him. I feel like this could be any crazy villain. I think, you know, it still would have just been as it was. It didn't feel like this is a specific Master thing. This is just something that a super insane crazy person would do. So yeah, I think this just turned the Master into generic crazy bad guy rather than the slight edge that the Master has that makes it interesting for me personally. But what John Sim is given to work with, I think he really excels. You know, he has some great moments, but all of the I'm like, oh, this is dumb. Yeah, I just, it's not for me. I don't mind, you know, people obviously do like that interpretation, which is fair enough. You know, it's certainly memorable, I will give it that. But yeah, just not for me.
I respectfully disagree. But no,
I know you do.
I do.
I'm surprised you respectfully disagree.
No, I don't. No. I can't preach that everything's fine. You can believe what you want, and then be like, "No, you're wrong," because that's not fair. I do agree. You know, with some aspects, I think making him have the zappy jump thing is a bit silly. But it does then set up how he sort of stops the Time Lords in part 2. Spoiler alert. So, you know, I get they had to do that because they couldn't just give him a gun as well, because then he just never. But fine. I think, yeah, the zappiness I think is what I take issue to the most. Purely the jump. I can jump high. I think isn't fair.
I quite like the skull kind of side of it.
Yeah,
I think that's bizarre, but I feel like it feels like, oh, I want him to have this weird skull thing. Oh, and he could jump really high. Oh, and he can shoot lasers. It's like, okay, but maybe just pick one of those and run with that, not give him everything. He just, you know, he's like a Pokemon by the end of this.
Yeah. So. I think that's fair because you know, we have had masters that have been deformed because they've tried to do whatever before, and that's why the skull thing itself isn't the worst thing.
Yeah, because he ran out of regeneration, so he started decaying, and he gets all
sluggy. I'm like, so yeah, that's kind of fine. But yeah, the big jumpy isn't necessarily the best bit. I think the intelligence is still there because you see that when he manipulates his situation in the Naismith Manor, you see his sort of with his conversations with the Doctor that he has there. I think we see it a little bit more next week, next episode. Rather than
it's too little too late for me because he was just mad for most of the episode and then he saw the opportunity.
Yeah, but I mean, part of that for me at least, I can justify it by the fact that he's just like come out of that revived state and he's still a bit on the fritz because he's not completely there, because he wasn't revived properly because he blew up halfway through. So I think it kind of makes sense story wise how he's ended up that way, because he's not in that craziness.
I'm not disputing that. I just think it's bad.
Understandable. As for the cult thing, I kind of get what you're saying. I think maybe what I would think is that he created that sort of that backup plan during the year he was in control, when he knew Martha was going after whatever, and he could have done it before he decided that screw it, I'm not going to regenerate, because he's a petty man at times. At the same time, he could have refused to regenerate because he knew it would piss the Doctor off and make him very upset, but also knew that he would come back anyway, and he was like, I can have my cake and eat it at this point. I can make him feel like shit and still come back and succeed. So I don't necessarily have the issue with that. I know, again, from reading The Writer's Tale, that Russell didn't want to make it too Satan ritually, which is why they had to sort of tone it down a little bit with the kiss and all that kind of stuff, because it was tea time on Christmas Day and they didn't want to do a whole satanic ritual to bring back the Master. Like, okay, fair enough. Yeah. So I kind of accept it, but at the same time, I do know it's not for everyone, which is fair enough. Not every incarnation of every character is for everyone, which is fair. So I don't begrudge you for your thoughts. I don't agree with them, but I don't begrudge you for them.
How do you not agree? You haven't mentioned that.
I know, right?
You haven't mentioned that in the many years we've known each other.
No, I know, right? So my sort of first negative, although some of them are sort of massive, is the Vin Voce.
All right, okay, yeah. They're part of my second one.
They're unnecessary. They don't need to. Like, thinking ahead to part 2, they play a bigger part in that one, but for this one at least, they're just unnecessary. You don't need them there. The Doctor can read the computers and be like, "Oh, that's what's happening," which he effectively does in the first place. So I just don't think they're needed in this. Maybe just have them appear in the second part and be like, "Oh, we saw the gate had activated, so we came and did whatever." Although, again, I could be in part 2, but like, they're not needed in this. But at the minute, they're not needed. They're just a couple of extra characters that just don't fit in with this story either. It's trying to be this epic sort of serious moment, and there's these two bright green, effectively comic relief characters that don't quite fit.
I do think this kind of struggles with its tone, I think, at times, this episode.
Yeah, I think mainly it struggles with the tone with the Vin Voce. I think other than that, when it's with the Master, it's serious. When it's the Doctor and Wilf, it's kind of more light-hearted. But then Vin Voce,
as far as I can remember, I think part 2 is fine with that. I think they kind of nail it with the tone in part 2. But I think this one's very messy.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't think they're needed in there. They don't really add anything to the story other than just to give context to the Doctor, really, and to the audience to some extent. But what they discuss between themselves when no one else is there, the audience is already aware of anyway, because we've just watched it. Yeah. But they're sort of my main one because they're just not necessary for this. So what's your second negative?
I've put it's bloated with extra characters that aren't interesting. This feels very much like this is a part 1, but part 1 also needs to be an hour. Part 2 also needs to be an hour. Maybe just introduce extra stuff to pad out this runtime, and you get a bit of extra time to wrap them up if you need to in the next part. So the Vin Voce were very much part of that. I'm just like, it's Banacapaletta, but tall and green. I'm like, okay, great. Super inventive, thanks. I'm so glad they're here. They don't really add much to them, and just whatever. At least we get the cactus joke from Wilf in it, and I do enjoy Shimmer. That was very funny. Me like reveals the second one. I think that's quite fun. Didn't really like them. The Silver Cloak, all the old biddies.
You need Wilf to have like yes. You need Wilf to have find the Doctor, but when they've done it, it's just a convenience so many times. Yeah, you might as well stick with that.
So and so. Like, you have mysterious woman here who's like the Doctor's mum. Just be like, he's going to be here. Off you go. I'm like, great. and then that can kind of set up more of the mystery and why Will's so desperate to know who she was by the end and stuff. I think that could have deepened the connection there. But instead, we get sexual assaulty old ladies and a scene of them taking a picture. Yes, taking a picture with him that feels like it takes 10 years. And I'm like, oh God, please kill me. Master, eat them all. I will I will happily accept this plot for you.
Yeah.
And I will praise it to my dying day if you eat all these old people. So yeah, there's that as well. And the Naismiths are so dull. I could not give a crap about any of them, particularly Abigail. It means bringer of joy. Shut up. Like, you are so uninteresting.
Yep.
I don't care about generic evil billionaire man. At least I think the guy playing Joshua Naismith, he's having fun with it. He's bringing a bit more to it. He's trying.
Yeah.
But Abigail is just so dull. I'm like, I don't want her to live forever. She's boring now. Imagine how boring she's going to be in 100 years. Yeah. It just feels like it means to an end so that everyone can become the master. The whole thing with the immortality gate, it's a neat idea. I just don't enjoy their side of things either. Luckily, there's not too much screen time given for them, and I think there's even less in the next one. But because of that, you're like, why are you here then? If you just, they're here for the plot rather than to have interesting characters. And I just think characters like that have been done better in other episodes. I wasn't a huge fan of what they were doing with the Master anyway, which is a big chunk of the episode. And then all the subplots for the most part had characters I also didn't find particularly interesting. I wasn't really going to be having a good time with part one. Just many extra characters bloating the runtime, and I just don't think they justify it because they don't add anything. They're just outright boring.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that leads on to my second negative as well, which is the Naismiths, Joshua and Abigail. You just need someone that's got this thing. That's all they're there for. They're there just to kidnap the master and put him there. If you want to do that, just make it be Unit or someone like that. That's an established thing, and just say, we found him, we've captured him because we knew he escaped. We've locked him up, and then have him escape. Have him use his intellect to escape and discover this piece of technology or something like that. You could even go back to that whole, he has this cult following, maybe some of them are in Unit and they free him and they're like, hey, we've got this thing, you could use that, and then he betrays them or whatever, I think that would be better than having these two very boring people. Again, going back to the writer's tale, apparently they're like supposed to be the background people to like the world. So I think there was a cut line where it's like, oh yeah, all these people like Harold Saxon, Henry Van Staten, they're all the big faces of rich people in the world, but these are the true manipulators of whatever. But you don't get that. You just get the fact that this is a rich man, and that's it.
Yeah.
You might as well just have him be a dying old rich man, and then have the master be like, okay, die, and I'm gonna take over. Which I think that's in Torchwood, where there's a dying man. He's like, oh, I'm gonna live, and then Owen kills him. I think something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely a series 2 thing, and then we have dying old man again in Miracle Day, but he's not dying because he lives in forever. And
that, yes. So that's more interesting than, I want my daughter to be alive longer and your daughter be weirdly attracted to the master consistently, which is very gross. And you're right, they're not really in the next one very much because they're the master, so doesn't matter.
Yeah, then they get turned back and arrested off screen.
Yeah.
We don't even get a nice resolution to them.
No. We get a line dialogue, which I think is probably what they deserve, to be fair. They're that interested.
Yeah.
But Naismith, just you could have something more interesting, but I guess you don't want, maybe it's a case of you don't want those characters to take away from the Doctor and the Master, and so therefore if they're bland, you're not going to focus on them. But
yeah.
So what was that your third, or have you got a third?
I've got a third.
Yeah, go on.
I'm sorry, it's not over.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I've only talked about 2 negatives.
Yeah.
My last one, just a few little script inconsistencies that I think kind of, again, just take a few things away from the story, and it kind of goes against itself at times.
Yeah.
they just decide when everyone knows that Howard Saxon exists and when he doesn't. The leader of the cult woman at the start says, and your trial is in secret. No one knows that Howard Saxon existed. And then we have the boy recognizing him. Oh, you're the prime minister who went mad, and he gets eaten and stuff. And all of that just feels a bit strange. And then, the master's like, oh, I don't want the doctor to smell me. And in the very next scene, he's like, I'm over here. Come and get me.
Yeah.
The very next time you see him, and just like, I get you're mad, but come on. And then when we first see Wilf, Timothy Dalton's like, no one remembers these nightmares except for him. And then they don't really explain why he's the only one who remembers. And then he doesn't even seem to remember until everything kicks off at the end again anyway. So maybe they explain that. I don't know. And then Donna's subconscious somehow guiding Wilf to Nathanus, and like she just knew he was going to find the doctor again and stuff. It feels like that's not wiping her mind completely if she still has like a subconscious in that kind of way. So I think that's incredibly dangerous. So yeah, there's just a few things like that I feel like detract from the story a bit, or contradict what had been established like 20 minutes earlier. Just a few things like that. I was like, oh, it's a bit strange.
Yeah, I think it definitely could have done with some fine tuning, which is ironic considering I think Russell finished this like ahead of schedule. It was all done and ready. It was like, good, I'm done. So it probably could have done with some.
I mean, to be fair, I was the same with essays at uni.
Yeah, especially if it's your last one. Like, there you go, bye.
I always submit in my first draft. I never rewrote.
No, I know. No, same. I still do it now. But yeah, I do agree there are some sort of inconsistencies, and they could have just, with the book especially, maybe just have Will be like, oh yeah, I have his book. Just say he has his book. I was reading it.
It just feels like, oh well, we've got Donna in this. We might as well just give her a weird scene.
Especially considering Wilf is so ungrateful. Like he's like, ugh, this book. What did you get me this for? I'm like, all right, Wilf, go on. I thought you're supposed to be a nice guy. At least be like, oh, thanks.
It says a lot when Sylvia's a little bit more subtle about not liking her present.
Well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do see what you mean, and there are a couple of things which could have just done with some fine tuning, especially with the just say nobody knew how Harold Saxon died, or nobody knew why he died, something like that, and then have him be like, hey, you're the guy that went crazy, because he doesn't necessarily say he's the prime minister. It's only the master that says, oh, I look like the old prime minister. The guy's like, hey, you're the guy.
The boy does say you look like.
Well, he said, yeah, the guy who went mad, not necessarily.
He does say he looked like Harold Saxon, I think.
Yeah. So I think it could have done with a little bit more commit to one or the other. I guess with the perception filter, there could be the whole.
It feels like they were written on different days.
Yeah, which they probably were, to be fair. Different nights, different 1 a.m.s. Yeah. But yeah, fair enough. My sort of so these last two, I know that's they're kind of just two small nitpicky ones. First of all, is the weird cut to Wilf in the kitchen with the lady on the TV during the cult scene, because we've seen the woman and Wilf in the church, and then when it's all like stormy and the master's about to be revived, Wilf's looking out the window like, oh no, oh storm, and the woman's on TV like, oh, and then she disappears and it cuts away. I'm like, we don't need that. That's just we don't need to see them. I don't get why you've included that, but whatever, fine. It's there. It doesn't take away from it, but I was just like, oh, I didn't think we saw the woman and Wilf sort of interact. They don't interact, but appear at the same time until Christmas Day, which I think would have had more of an impact if that scene wasn't there. But fine. Maybe it's just to set up the fact that she can do it, and then I don't know, whatever. And then I think the CGI is a bit hit and miss. I don't think necessarily the skeleton CGI is the worst we've ever seen. It's definitely not aged well, but it's not the worst. I think the biggest crime in this one is the exploded prison.
Yes, that's what I say. That's the one that stood out to me.
When David Tennant stood in front, because it's not just the prison that's blown up. The TARDIS is also not really there. So I'm pretty sure it's just David on the green screen. I'm like,
I think it is, yeah.
I'm like, it looks bad, guys. Just don't include this. But especially considering we had the really nice vistas of the Ood sphere, which looked okay, except maybe for like the Ood that had been placed on things. But overall, it looked okay. And then it's got this crappy, blown up building. It's like, oh, it looks a bit naff. But other than that, there's not too much CGI, I don't think, in this. You know, the Skeleton Master is fine most of the time. I think there's a bit where he like flies down to the screen that's a little bit dodgy, but it's only like a second, so it's not a big deal. And most everything else is done with practical effects, like, you know, the Master changing people, that's virtually done practically, except for speeding it up. And obviously the Vinvoci are all practical effects anyway, so there's not really much else I can complain about there. So have you got any other sort of negative points you want to touch on?
I do, but I'm not going to say them because I feel like I've been harsh enough.
It's all right. It's all right. You keep going. I'll bat my tears.
Okay. Well, we've already talked about the Doctor talk about regeneration as death. If he just thought like, "Oh, I'm going to die," like, fair enough. I'd be worried about that too, to be honest. But it seems like even if I change, it feels like dying. I don't like that particular attitude. I just, that's again personal taste. I think it's much worse than the next one anyway. And then again, this isn't really the episode's fault, so it doesn't. It's just like it's a shame that we don't get much of like the aftermath of the Time Lord Victorious thing. Obviously, we get the really great scene in the cafe, but it's a shame that the Doctor's just basically the Doctor again in this one. But you know, that's more time constraints. We don't have many specials left. Thing, than a thing with the episode that's wrong.
Yeah, and I think after I've read the Time Lord Victorious books, and he's like, "Oh, I did some things, I went too far." You can now read more into that, and it gives a little bit more depth to that line. Whereas if you're just watching the episodes, like, all right, you saved 3 people. I wouldn't say that's like going horribly far, and one of them then killed themselves anyway. But after reading the books, it's like, okay, I see what you mean there.
Yeah. All you had to do was wait 11 years.
Yeah, all I had to do was wait until a pandemic to read them. So you know, I do get that, and I think now that it's out in the weird format they did it, it does add a bit of layer. But at the time and in this episode, it doesn't quite work, or at least it's not as hard hitting as it could be. But as you mentioned, that's because they only had 4 episodes, and Russell only thought of this when they were writing the Waters of Mars. So what can you do? It's too late at that point.
It's too late to apologize.
What I would also like to add is, what's the point of the Doctor hiding behind the TARDIS outside of Donna's house? The TARDIS is in full view just because you're hidden behind it, like, oh.
And you have met her as John Smith before. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, it's John. Hiya, John.
I know you don't want to risk it, but surely the TARDIS is more iconic than not to harsh your mellow, David, but the TARDIS is probably a more iconic view than your face.
And you've apparently put this protection on her anyway. So
yes, no. I don't think I have any other ones. Oh, it's Naismith going, "I'm not an idiot." I'm like, you are the biggest idiot. Just bringing him here is the biggest.
You fool.
I know I mentioned this to you before, but I really like how they just bring the Master a big ass turkey to eat rather than like a Christmas dinner. It's just, here's a turkey. Maybe he asked for it, but it doesn't. I don't think so. I think they just went, turkey. There you go. And then, as I also mentioned to you off screen, the burger that the Master eats at the start, I always think it looks lovely, and I'm like, I could kill like 2 of them burgers now. I would love them, because they're probably not made of the best stuff, but they sure as hell taste nice.
Burger van burgers, like when they're right, they're right. You can't beat them.
And that one looks amazing. I also quite liked the Doctor's entrance, where he has the car keys on the TARDIS and he's got his like little cowboy hat and his lei. I think that's quite funny, and it definitely doesn't set the tone, but it really tricks you into thinking this is going to be nice. Then everything just goes, oh, this isn't a nice episode. Everything's going wrong. But right. So before we get on to rating the episode, have you got us some fun facts? I apologise if my writer's tale insights have stepped on some of them.
You've stepped on my toes a bit, but that's fine.
Standard.
Okay then. So the working title for this story was The Immortality Gate, At one point, part 1 was called The Final Days of Planet Earth and was the title that Russell teased in Doctor Who magazine, saying that the title of part 1 was going to be 6 words long. However, he later decided to make both parts called The End of Time, as he felt the original part 1 title didn't fit upon seeing the episode.
The End of Time, part 1. It's still 6. Still got away with it.
Sure. This is the 10th consecutive story in which Russell T Davies receives a writing credit, the only Doctor Who writer to have done so thus far. So there you go. The elder Ood is voiced by actor Brian Cox, who went on to play Doctor Who creator Sidney Newman in An Adventure in Space and Time.
Lovely.
This is the first multiple-part story since Survival, which is the last story of the classic run, to have one overarching title, and the first 2-parter since Revelation of the Daleks to be called Part 1 and Part 2 as the distinguishing factor. This is the first real-time appearance of the Time Lord since the trial of the Time Lord in 1986, so it had been a while. Russell T Davies originally had the Master leave the letter M at his crime scenes as a trail for the Doctor to follow. This was dropped when he realised it had been established that the Doctor would simply know where to find his fellow Time Lord, which makes probably a bit more sense. Yeah. But, you know, I don't think I'd have minded doing that alone. I think that'd been funny. This is the first time that a real-world US presidency has coincided with the Doctor Who universe, because it's always been fictional presidents up till now.
Yep.
And I think it will be again potentially, but you know, Obama.
Well, it won't be who we thought the president was going to be now, because he's a bad actor, bad man. So never mind.
Yeah. This is the second time the main titles feature all male credits following the next Doctor.
How sexist.
I know, right? It's also the second time someone's credited in the main titles for playing a villain. Both Eric Roberts and now John Sim received it for playing the Master.
Nice.
Ooh. In an early draft of the script, the Doctor would have addressed the reveal that the Doctor was half human in the TV movie, dismissing it as a 48-hour bug. The line ended up being cut.
Yeah,
that would have angered all 5 people.
Yeah. They said that he had a button, it made him do it, and Russell was like, "Nah, it's too meta. I'm taking it out." And he didn't.
Too meta. Let's make the Master race instead. Omega was originally going to be the narrator instead of Rassilon, Timothy Dalton's character, but the idea was dropped. Still waiting for Omega to come back.
60th? No.
The 60th, yeah. Naismith mentions that the gate was found by Torchwood at the foot of Mount Snowdon. In Doomsday, Yvonne Hartman also mentions that this is where the Magna clamps were found, so perhaps they were also Vin Voci in origin. Speculation. During his resurrection, the Master tells Lucy, "You will obey me," the catchphrase of the original incarnation of the Master, played by Roger Delgado, which is a nice touch. Rassilon's narrations often began with, "and so it came to pass." The Master's narration at the end of The Sound of Drums also began in the same way. Time Lords. They just read the same books.
They're just the same. That's why
they're all the same.
Yeah.
They're all the same. Yeah. Russell originally wanted the Doctor and the Master to swap bodies in this story, but decided he didn't want David Tennant to spend a large chunk of his final story playing someone other than the Doctor. He'd also already used the idea in New Earth, so scrapped it.
Right, fair enough.
And you know, you peak with Cassandra, don't you?
Yeah.
Donna originally was only supposed to appear in the epilogue of part 2, but was given a larger role throughout the story. In the end, Catherine Tate filmed her role in the story in 5 days, which makes sense. Easy time. Abigail Naismith was originally called Alice. I assume they changed it so they could do that awful line about bringer of joy. Shut up, Abigail. This episode features the first mention of anyone in the Master's family, as he mentioned his father during a conversation with the Doctor. The Master's original plan was to trap Earth in the Time War in the place of Gallifrey, which I'd have massively preferred. Patrick Stewart was offered the role of Rassilon. He did not accept it, obviously, but Timothy Dalton's an excellent choice regardless. Both have great voices, so I don't think we necessarily lost out. Originally, much of the Vin Voci's faces retained their human skin tones, but it was decided partway into production that they should be fully green. Scenes that had already been recorded were tinted in post to match up. You kind of see what scenes they patched up because their teeth are also a bit green.
Right.
I did notice that this time around. The Vin Voci were also originally to have very similar names that Wilf always got confused by, but the Doctor never did, but they cut that joke out. John Sim based his portrayal of Master in the story on The Joker in the Dark Knight, which was released the year before, which we'd already talked about. The Doctor and the Master's confrontation originally took place in the desert, but this was changed when the location ended up being used for Planet of the Dead. And then finally, Wilf's military history of never killing anyone and his pride over never killing a man was added to his character at the insistence of Bernard Cribbins himself, who had exactly the same history. So there you go.
Lovely. Yeah, I know that Planet Swap one was battered around a bit, but Russell's reason for sort of not doing it in the end was like, why would he want to bring back Gallifrey now when he had control of the Earth for like a whole year and didn't do it then? You know, it doesn't make sense for him to suddenly come back and be like, yeah, let's do it. Because even in this episode, he's not like, I'm bringing back Gallifrey. That's only when it kicks off.
For the next episode.
Yeah, that's only when it kicks off with the time from the Time Lord's End or anything. But yes, I think that's fair enough. So out of 10, what are you giving The End of Time Part 1?
End of Time Part 1 gets a 6 from me.
Oh, lovely. Mine's an 8.5. So
yeah,
there
not
is
a
there is a slight dip between us.
Not our biggest though. We've had a gap of 3 before, I think.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, mine originally was 8, but then I was like, no, I really like this episode, so I upped it by 0.5 because I still don't think it's, there are issues. But never mind. So you prefer Legend of the Sea Devils to this one? Interesting.
I do.
We recently reviewed that one. Oh, well, fair enough. As we always say, everyone can like anything. If you like this and you love it, great. If you dislike it and think it's the worst thing ever, fine. It's fine. Just don't be like, oh, you're an idiot because you think that. Because that's...
You're wrong because you don't agree with me.
It's just not constructive. Everyone can like everything. And that's why I think doing this, where we have positives and negatives, we always acknowledge that there are good things about everything. And there are bad things about everything.
Yes.
So it all evens out. We could...
And 6 out of 10 is above average, folks,
yes,
before you come for me.
And if we really wanted to boil it down, we could just say, is this a good episode, yes or no? And just do that for the rest. And then almost all of them will be
and
yes.
Then I'd have said no like maybe 2 times or 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. So, you get your little bit of annoyance with the rating, but we always, balance it out either way. And let's see if next week does any better for you, because next week is obviously the conclusion of The End of Time, and the conclusion of David Tennant's run, and the conclusion of Russell T Davies's first run as showrunner.
Yes.
And it's not the conclusion of John Sims' Master, but that's a long way away yet.
No.
It is the conclusion of Timothy Dalton's Rassilon. He doesn't come back.
No, we get Powell and Rassilon maybe next year.
Yes, we get his matey boy from Game of Thrones, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't think he's a very good actor.
I can't remember too much about him because that's what Hellbent, that one is, isn't it? So that one's notoriously
a very polarizing finale.
Yes,
I think it's safe to say.
Yes, part 1 and part 2 especially. But again, that's a while away yet.
Part 1's Heaven Sent. I think that's generally favoured upon.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, is that you've got a lot of people see Heaven Sent, and then it goes Hellbent. But
bit of a decline, yeah, for sure.
But who knows? We'll get to that probably by mid
Clara.
Yes. For you,
Clara,
it's the other way.
Yeah. As soon as Clara turns up in the waitress outfit, I'm like, yep. Okay. Best episode ever. And although I'm always slightly burned because I was at that diner and then they filmed those scenes 2 days later, and I'm like, no, so close.
We've all been there.
I'm still not over it. It's been 7 years.
Oh, I just got to hang out in Cardiff more. That's the trick.
Well, that diner's closed now, so I'm not going to use it again.
No, but they could use somewhere else. You never know.
Depends how much budget they get for the new era. They might be like, F Cardiff.
If anything, Cardiff's cheaper than everywhere else. So they might be like, yay, Cardiff.
That's why they've always used it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it for The End of Time Part 1. We'll be back with the End of Time Part 2 next
I've just
weekend.
I've got the Clara.
Oh yeah, there you go. You're back.
Yeah.
God's sake. Oh God, it's all coming together.
She's an excellent character.
She sure is a character.
Yeah.
No, I could.
Clara to you is what The End of Time is to me.
yeah, probably.
It's going to be our two massive disagreements.
Yeah, but it's fine. It's fine. You can have these disagreements. It's okay.
You'll get your time to complain.
Yeah, I will. In 2 weeks. soon as Series 5
Yeah, that's
starts,
true. Oh yeah, just you watch, folks. The rating's going to start going significantly down, strangely.
yeah,
in a
who knows?
couple of weeks.
But yes, we will see, because that does mean we are coming on to Matt Smith's era. So I'm interested to see how I review them as well, because it's been, I think, looking at it overall, I think I like a lot of Matt Smith, especially his Series 5 episodes. I think I have quite fond memories of them. So they'll likely to still be up there. But then I think when we get into Series 6 and 7, where it all goes, especially Series 6, where it gets a little bit more convoluted, I think maybe there'll be some drops, but we'll see. That's all to come. That will continue. We'll still review these episodes, and we're also going to try and do some more sort of discussion-y things around new Who. Obviously, with the centenary special coming out in autumn, we'll be looking ahead to that. Hopefully, we're getting a next Doctor announcement soon. It's been teased by the BBC News, saying that it's within a few weeks. So we will see what happens there.
I have no idea who that's going to be.
No, it's a big. We might have to record a here's who we think it's going to be before it comes, so we can do it now, and then it comes out.
If we're both free, like when they announce it live, we should like be on Zoom when it's announced
100%.
and record our live reactions to it.
We will try.
We will try our best. If not, I'll do it.
Yeah. We'll see. Either way, that kind of content will be on the channel moving forward. And as always, Liam has similar stuff on his channel that you should all go and check out. You literally just search Liam Duke in YouTube and you will find him. It's not that hard. But
that's my name.
That's it for us this week. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.